Let's go live now to Queen's Park, where Education Minister Stephen Lecce is speaking.
They could be used for administrative purposes. They could be used as a storage facility, which there are examples of. But are there other school boards, coterminous boards, that may need the school because they're facing growth that other board isn't? And because of an element of, territorialism at times, school boards don't sell the land to the other board that actually needs it based on real enrollment needs. So this is going to change the culture to say, look, one taxpayer paid for this. Let's utilize our assets, our real estate portfolio for the benefit of learning and other critical priorities of the ministry and of the government.
It seems you're coming down on trustees and school boards, directors of education. You want greater accountability. You want to elevate what their responsibilities are and educate them more. Is that a direct response to you taking over the Peel board because of racism issues and the Oakville teacher that came to school with the large prosthetic breasts that made headlines around the world, and yet parents were angry and felt that the school board didn't react fast enough to that? Is this a direct result to those two instances?
I think when it comes to the school board governance improvements, it's a reminder that there's 700 trustees that are frontline, involved in often operational decisions, billions of dollars of investment, and they are responsible for literally millions of children. So if we can improve the governance training of those individuals, we can ensure that the local school boards are much more effective because there are too many examples in Ontario. There's some notable examples and many other small examples in the province where they're not, I think, at the standards when it comes to governance and using a more collaborative spirit when it comes to working to move the interests of kids first. In Peel, as a great case study, we had to take over a school board for the first time in the history of the province, and I believe the country, on the basis of anti-racism and broad, systematic dysfunction of school board trustees, not reflective of all. I'm just speaking about this board at that time and moment in time in history, that were more interested in personal beefs than putting kids first. And there were a lot of kids in that school board, let me assure you, that had real issues when it comes to barriers to their success. So we had to step in. I don't want to step in any further. I want school boards to be more functioning, more professional bodies. And I think many trustees, to their credit, I think they want to be part of this solution. And so that's part of it. The other element of it is, how do we ensure that the ministry priorities when it comes to student achievement are actually, there's some sort of measurement tool? Because setting a priority is great, but unless we actually have a means by which to measure adherence to those priorities and implementation of it. And that's why we've included the board improvement plan. That means school boards, directors and trustees will develop a plan that aligns with the provincial priorities on student achievement. They are now publicly posting the plan. They have to do public consultations on the development of the plan. And of course, I think that creates an element of transparency. A lot of parents want to know, how is my school going to refocus on the basics, get back to what schools were all about, which is mastery of fundamental skills, the development of leaders and socially and emotionally intelligent people. And I think our schools do great work. I just think we can do a lot better. And my mission is we should lift our standards. We've got to lift the ambitions of kids. There are too many children living in a basement, too many kids who've lost hope in our province and country. It's not their fault. We can do something better. We can work together. We can collaborate. We can better maximize the investments. We can reach higher and work harder and smarter when it comes to improving outcomes. You saw the EQAO data. That should not be a data point any of us should be proud of. And yes, while we're not the worst in Canada, that's still not enough. That's not a good reason to be complacent. So I think what the message the Premier and the government is sending is, we really just want the system to be better. And I think what's interesting is, going back to 1993, under the former NDP government, a different time, a report written by a former federal Liberal minister and a Democrat at the time, agreed that the system could be better. And so the aim today is to collaborate with everyone involved, parents, communities, the workforce, our educators, the students, and the school board leadership, to send a signal that we got to step up and do better for kids.
Last question, 2.7% increase. I mean, that's not even close to what inflation has been. Is that enough for students? I imagine the unions are going to say it's not nearly enough.
Look, we are increasing investments, you're right, by 2.7%. That's over a $650 million net increase for the coming school year.
Doesn't keep up with population?
Well, I mean, when you look at the overall story of GSN funding, of baseline funding, it's up from the former Liberals from 27% in our ministry. We understand there are needs. Today, I'm announcing the hiring of an additional 1,000 teachers for de-streamed courses leading into and out of de-streamed courses. And yesterday, Patrice Barnes and I announced another nearly 1,000 educators. These are new investments that are going to be focused on things like literacy educator specialists and math educators. We're doubling the amount of math coaches. So we are building a plan that responds to the challenge today. The big issue we hear is young kids are not reading because they've really lacked that social development over the past few years. So what are we doing? We're following the Human Rights Commission's report on the right to read by instituting a provincial screening assessment of every young child starting in senior kindergarten to grade 2. We're going to do that for 450,000+ kids twice a year next year. We're then going to put in place roughly 700 educators, special reading specialists, teachers, to then help the very kids that are underperforming or not meeting the standard. Like, it's a very targeted plan. We have $20 million in school safety to help with more monitors, more mental health workers. We've invested in mental health is a huge issue right now. I know, very passionate issue for many of you today. So one of the big issues we heard and one of the priorities we heard from parents is, look, the way the school system works is you get access to services September to June, and then a parent has to scramble for supports in July and August. Like, the system was made for everyone but the kid and the patient. So we're extending funding to annualize it through the summer as we've done once prior. I think that's going to make a difference. Better consistency, more access to the same practitioner. That's a strength for a lot of these kids that have very complex needs. So we're going to increase investment. I mean, mental health, we went from $18 million to over $100 million today. So I appreciate the needs are rising, and I just want families to be assured that the new supports, the new staffing, and the overall increase of investment of literally over $600 million this coming school year alone is going to make a difference. And obviously every year, we have been able to provide additional funding for publicly funded schools because we recognize how important it is to help set these kids up for lifelong success.
Minister, you keep saying that these changes are going to refocus the system on the basics. How is that actually different from what the system is focused on now?
Well, I think right now many families are concerned that their kids are not meeting the provincial standards. EKO data, I think, is a compelling data point today that wasn't the case some years ago, certainly at the level of regression we've seen post-pandemic. The head of Dyslexia Canada yesterday, Dyslexia Ontario, Alicia Smith, spoke about roughly a third of students. They graduate, they get their physical certificate, but they still are not meeting the standards of literacy for their age. The point is that schools need to be emphasizing and focusing on strengthening skills that matter to parents, mastering the skills that are going to help young people succeed in whatever discipline they choose. Like, I just want them to succeed whatever they choose. It could be from a STEM career or in the arts or anything in between. We need to make sure young people are able to achieve. And so the reason why we've put this in place, the board improvement plan to create accountability, and the emphasis on fundamental skills development, the fact that yesterday we announced over $170 million plan specific to reading, writing, and math, is because the fundamental skills have regressed, and the government is sending a clear signal to school boards, to educators, and to parents themselves that we hear you, we understand the problem, and we're investing to meet the challenge by refocusing a system on what actually is going to help your kids succeed in life.
Okay, but if I can follow up, please, if I could follow up, you talk about then the accountability to school boards for meeting these outcomes. So what is the accountability sort of hammer that you've got over the boards in this? They just have to post these plans, and is that all? Like, or do you have some sort of authority if the boards aren't actually meeting the expected outcomes to do something?
There are already existing authorities that the ministry have with respect to school boards fulfilling their fulfilling their obligations and their directions. And of course, we'll exercise and use those authorities if we must. The goal here today is to send a signal to school boards to refocus their energies on what matters most, which is improving reading, writing, and math skills in STEM education. There's now a public-facing accountability by posting a board improvement plan that is specific to the tactics of how they're going to implement that plan. They have to listen and consult with parents at least twice annually on the development of that plan and then post it. And of course, the ministry will be acutely interested in their adherence of every school board and work with them. My aim is through creating a culture in the ministry where they collaborate with us to lift their standards. Of course, if they don't, we will act and ensure that they implement and fulfill the clear requirement and request of parents, which is we up our game when it comes to reading, writing, and math.
Minister Tlank's
Yes.
first question, if schools need to get back to basics, what is it that they're doing now that you think they need to be doing less of?
Well, I think the EKO data, I think the fact that we have fundamental regression in reading, writing, and math skills is a great case study for why we need to act. I think a lot of parents feel like, kids need to focus in on those skills more. There's a great deal of concern. I mean, we heard a third of kids are graduating without the literacy skills. They may get their OSSD, they may get their graduation certificate, but they don't have the skills to prepare them for life. Many of you are parents. Many of you will know as kids transition to post-secondary, the skilled trades, the kids don't feel confident or ready. That is not a reflection on them, it's a reflection on the system, on how we can do better to refocus our time in front of a child on skills development that will lead them to a good job, owning a home, and a more productive, positive life in the country. I think that's what we're signaling, and we're trying to emphasize in the clearest terms that skills focus paired with more investment and roughly 2,000 more frontline educators focused on reading, writing, and math, and those D-stream courses are going to make a big difference at the early end of a young person's career when it comes to reading in kindergarten, grade 1 and 2, as they exit elementary school in grades 7, 8, and 9, and 10 with D-stream courses. And of course, through our GSN release, you'll notice more supports for co-op placement, more hands-on learning, more opportunities for young people to use the theoretical knowledge to learn in the classroom in the workforce. And I think that's a gap that exists in Ontario. It exists in many other industrialized states and countries and provinces. I just think in Ontario, we see this as a challenge, and we're bringing forth a plan to lift our standards and, frankly, fix the problems that have existed in Ontario for decades.
Minister, you've been talking, though, and your government has been talking about back to basics.
We've been listening to Education Minister Stephen Lecce making an education announcement at Queen's Park, introducing the Better Schools and Student Outcomes Act. If passed, this proposed legislation will help deliver better schools, jobs, and outcomes for students. Part of that legislation includes the addition of nearly 1,000 specialized math and literacy educators to help boost skills.